Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley were two Kansas women on a routine drive, traveling to pick up Butler's children. But this ordinary trip would turn into a haunting nightmare that ended in bloodshed, betrayal, and chilling revelations. Found buried in rural Oklahoma weeks after their disappearance, Butler and Kelley's tragic fates stunned their communities. Even more shocking was the discovery that their killers were members of a shadowy group known as God's Misfits, a radical faction with dangerous beliefs and a web of disturbing secrets. Veronica Butler, 27, was a devoted mother engaged in a custody dispute over her children with their paternal grandmother, Tifany Adams. Jilian Kelley, 39, was a trusted friend who joined Butler on this fateful trip to ensure her safety. Both women were from Kansas and deeply connected to their families and communities. The scheduled trip on March 30th, 2024, was meant to be brief. Simply a drive to Oklahoma to bring Butler's children back after a visit with Adams. Unbeknownst to them, Adams had dark plans in place. She and her group, God's Misfits, were prepared to ensure that Butler would never take her children back. By the time authorities were alerted to the women's disappearance, it was already too late. The custody battle between Butler and Adams had intensified in recent months. Adams had taken a strong stance in retaining custody of the children, often clashing with Butler over visitation rights. The tensions surrounding this case were well known within the community, and those closest to Butler feared for her safety. This family dispute laid the groundwork for what would become an unimaginably twisted plot. Tifany Adams, in her desperation to retain control, enlisted the help of her boyfriend Bert Cullum and several other members of the God's Misfits group. Together, they conspired to stop Butler at all costs. The name, God's Misfits, evokes curiosity, but the group's beliefs were far from benign. They were an anti-government faction, marked by a blend of radical ideologies and religious fervor. Members of the group saw themselves as outcasts, united by a shared sense of disenfranchisement and distrust in the legal system. They viewed their allegiance to the group as a higher calling, believing their faith justified extreme actions. This insular, secretive group met regularly, discussing their views on the government, family, and societal roles. Many members harbored strong anti-establishment sentiments, with a particularly hostile attitude toward family court rulings. For Adams, whose desperation over the custody battle had reached its peak, God's Misfits seemed to offer an answer, albeit a dark and twisted one. That on March 30th, 2024, Butler and Kelley began their drive to Oklahoma, unaware of the ambush waiting for them. As they neared the agreed meeting spot, Adams and her conspirators, including Cullum and two other Misfit members, Cole Twombly and his wife Cora, were ready to execute their grim plan. The group's exact strategy is unclear, but evidence suggests they blocked the road, forcing the women's vehicle to a stop. At that moment, Cullum allegedly struck Butler with a hammer while Adams and the Twomblys restrained Kelley. The assault was brutal, and it was just the beginning. After a terrifying struggle, Butler and Kelley were overpowered and subsequently transported to a remote location. Their vehicle was abandoned in Texas County, Oklahoma, left as a sign of their last struggle, stained with blood and scattered with shattered glass. A silent testimony to the violence that had occurred. After failing to hear from Butler and Kelley, concerned family members contacted the authorities, who initiated a search. Police located the abandoned car days later in Texas County, raising immediate red flags. The blood spattered inside and a hammer left at the scene pointed to a violent confrontation, and authorities feared the worst. Following leads, the investigators combed through remote areas, hoping to uncover clues that might lead them to Butler and Kelley. Days turned into weeks, but on April 14th, 2024, their search came to a gruesome end. Hidden beneath a dam on a secluded pasture, they uncovered a chilling burial site. A hastily dug pit containing not only the women's bodies but also a chest freezer, blood-stained clothing, a knife, and duct tape. The shocking discovery led investigators straight to the suspects: Tifany Adams, Bert Cullum, Cole and Cora Twombly, and Paul Grice, another God's Misfits member implicated in the crime. Each played a role in the premeditated plan that ended in Butler and Kelley's deaths. Tifany Adams was allegedly the mastermind, driven by a twisted determination to keep her grandchildren away from Butler. Her partner, Bert Cullum, was suspected to have played a direct role in the assault, wielding the hammer that injured Butler. Cole and Cora Twombly acted as lookouts, securing the area and ensuring no one interrupted the ambush. Paul Grice, although not present at the scene, reportedly helped coordinate the plan. This horrifying alignment of beliefs and actions within God's Misfits turned a custody dispute into a horrific murder scheme. Each member's involvement demonstrated a chilling loyalty to their ideals and an alarming lack of remorse for the consequences. After piecing together the evidence and establishing each suspect's role, authorities made their move. Adams, Cullum, the Twomblys, and Grice were apprehended and charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. The brutality of the murders and the involvement of multiple conspirators left no room for leniency for the community. The arrests offered a semblance of closure, but the horror of the crime remained. Each suspect was held without bail, awaiting a lengthy legal process that would hopefully bring justice to the victims' families. The sheer scale and brutality of the plot left many grappling with how a group of seemingly ordinary individuals could orchestrate such a cold-blooded crime. The Butler and Kelley murders shook Kansas and Oklahoma communities to their cores. For those who knew the victims, the idea that a custody dispute could escalate into such violence was beyond comprehension. Parents, friends, and neighbors mourned the loss of two innocent women. Struggling to make sense of the tragedy, this case also ignited a wave of fear, especially among families involved in custody disputes, who wondered if the system was equipped to handle such intense and dangerous situations. For many, the God's Misfits case became a haunting reminder of how ideological extremism can seep into the lives of seemingly ordinary people. With devastating results, the legal process for Adams, Cullum, the Twomblys, and Grice was complex, with numerous charges and evidence to consider. Prosecutors laid out a case depicting premeditated murder, supported by witness testimonies, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. Each suspect's role was examined in detail, revealing their shared responsibility for the brutal murders. Defense attorneys argued that some suspects were coerced or misled, but the overwhelming evidence suggested otherwise. Witnesses from the God's Misfits group testified about meetings where members, including the suspects, discussed anti-government ideologies and rejected traditional familial roles, linking the suspects' beliefs to the motivation behind the murders. As the trial unfolded, the horrifying details left the courtroom in silence, with chilling evidence painting a portrait of a cold, calculated conspiracy. Each suspect's fate rested in the hands of the jury, who faced the daunting task of delivering a verdict that would bring justice for Butler and Kelley. The case of God's Misfits raises troubling questions about the psychological motivations that drive people to extreme actions. Why would seemingly ordinary individuals, motivated by personal grudges and radical beliefs, commit murder? In interviews, former members described God's Misfits as a haven for those who felt disillusioned by society, offering them a sense of purpose. Even if that purpose led to violence, experts in criminal psychology pointed out that groups like God's Misfits often rely on isolation, manipulation, and charismatic leaders who can influence members to adopt extreme positions. For Adams, who already viewed Butler as an enemy in the custody dispute, God's Misfits offered validation for her worst impulses, justifying violence as a means to an end. Media coverage of the Butler and Kelley murders spread rapidly, with headlines focusing on the shocking brutality of the crime and the twisted beliefs of God's Misfits. Social media buzzed with outrage, sorrow, and morbid curiosity as the public tried to understand how a custody dispute had led to murder. The public's fascination with the case fueled countless discussions about family dynamics, radical ideologies, and the justice system's limitations. Many feared the influence of extremist groups in local communities, wondering if there were other cases like God's Misfits waiting to be uncovered. For true crime enthusiasts, the case became a disturbing example of how personal grievances and radical beliefs can spiral into unimaginable violence. The chilling details, combined with the dark influence of an extremist group, made the story resonate beyond the local community, Sparking debates and even calls for reforms, the case highlighted broader societal issues around extremist groups and the handling of high-conflict custody disputes. Local authorities, community leaders, and lawmakers took note of the dangers that groups like God's Misfits can pose, particularly when their members begin to align personal motives with collective ideologies. In response, some have called for increased monitoring of known radical groups and additional resources for law enforcement to investigate cases with similar characteristics. There's also a push for family court reforms, especially concerning how authorities evaluate and respond to custody disputes that appear high risk. In extreme cases, psychological assessments and mandatory counseling have been suggested to help mitigate the potential for violent escalation. Though this story is rooted in darkness, the legacy of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley has brought about important awareness. Their loved ones have continued to share memories of their lives and have worked to preserve their memories beyond the horrors of their deaths. Friends and family of Butler and Kelley hope that their story serves as a reminder of the real human lives impacted by violent ideologies and unresolved disputes that honor their memory. Some in the community have organized events and vigils, advocating for mental health awareness, support for families navigating custody battles, and stronger action against groups with radical, violent leanings. In this way, Butler and Kelley's story has sparked a desire for change, leaving a lasting impact on those who knew them and those who were moved by their story. The double murder orchestrated by members of God's Misfits is a haunting reminder of the extremes to which personal vendettas and radical beliefs can lead. What began as a custody dispute ended in a brutal crime that exposed the hidden dangers lurking within seemingly ordinary lives. The case is a dark and tragic example of how extremist ideologies, when combined with personal grievances, can have devastating consequences. As the dust settles and the legal process unfolds, one truth remains clear. The story of Veronica Butler and Jilian Kelley will continue to resonate, serving as a warning of the lengths some are willing to go for misguided beliefs and personal vendettas. Their lives, now immortalized in a chilling cautionary tale, highlight the urgent need for vigilance, understanding, and preventive measures to safeguard others from similar fates. The God's Misfits case stands as a reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come not from distant dangers, but from within our own communities, hidden behind masks of ordinary lives. For those left behind, the memory of Butler and Kelley lives on, a legacy built on a desire to prevent such a tragedy from ever occurring again.